Modern advice suggests that life is a gentle moral test. There is a common promise that if you possess enough patience and humility, the world will eventually reward your goodness. It is a comforting thought, usually written by those who have never been truly tested. The reality is far less kind. Real insight comes from the floor, from surviving exile, poverty, and the irrelevance of a life stripped of influence. It comes from being hoisted by a rope until your shoulders leave their sockets, realizing the world doesn't care if you scream. Niccolò Machiavelli recorded these observations in 1532, not as a moral guide, but as a map of the brutal collisions between human nature and the demands of power. He argued that the universe is indifferent to your virtues. These collisions strip away every illusion of divine intervention. They leave you to face the raw results of your own decisions and the reality of your current standing in a world that takes everything it can. Prosperity is the most deceptive trap of all. Early success convinces you that your current strategy is a work of genius, masking the invisible role of fortune. You fail to see the thousands of coincidences and errors by your enemies that actually cleared your path. The 1490s Italian kings sank into comfortable wealth, ignoring their militaries. When Charles crossed the Alps, they fell like fruit from a shaken tree. That success inevitably leads to power, which functions as a high-intensity magnifier. It does not create flaws, it reveals existing incompetence. In the hands of a fool, power is a weight that eventually pulls the owner underwater. As you rise, the flow of information changes. Those around you stop reporting the truth and begin reporting what they think will keep them in your favor. You begin living in a reality constructed entirely of flattery and omissions. Trying to please everyone in this state is a death sentence. True order requires the calculated severity shown by Cesare Borgia. He understood that a single decisive act of cruelty could prevent 1,000 acts of chaos, while politeness often invites open rebellion. The ultimate danger of your ascent is that you become a prisoner of your own myth. You are so blinded by your own reflection that you cannot see the betrayal forming in the very ranks you think you control. A stranger cannot ruin you. Betrayal requires proximity. It only comes from those you have allowed into your private circles, those who have seen your weaknesses and possess the leverage to strike where it actually hurts. This is the predictable outcome of human nature. Most people are bound by interest rather than affection. When the benefits of walking away exceed the benefits of standing by you, the bond of loyalty almost always snaps. People respond to betrayal in 3 ways: shattering into bitterness, becoming paranoid tyrants who drive away allies, or replacing blind trust with structural security. They build systems where betrayal is expensive and loyalty is profitable, relying on weighted incentives rather than individual character. Surviving betrayal is not a matter of learning to love again. It is a matter of building your house out of stone instead of wood, ensuring that even if one beam fails, the roof stays over your head. Adversity acts as a ruthless filter. It burns away weak materials, leaving only the iron underneath to harden into steel. If there is no iron to begin with, the fire simply leaves behind ash. In 216 BC, Rome faced total collapse. 80,000 Roman soldiers were slaughtered by Hannibal in a single afternoon at Cannae. Rome's survival depended on a counterintuitive refusal to panic. They banned public mourning to protect the collective will, abandoning the search for a quick, emotional victory. They settled into a 14-year war of attrition, slowly strangling Hannibal's momentum without ever meeting him in major battle again. That grueling endurance allowed Rome to rise and build an empire. They won not by being better people, but by being more durable. The test of adversity asks if you can generate your own heat when the external world goes cold. It strips away your titles and your wealth to see if the engine inside you is self-sustaining. The slowest test is time. It erodes anyone who requires a constant audience to stay motivated. Most of life is not a dramatic battle. It is the quiet, repetitive work of maintenance when no one is applauding. Time also creates the trap of the successful nature. Pope Julius II conquered his enemies through wild, aggressive energy because the era rewarded it. But if the world had shifted to a time that required patience, Julius would have been destroyed by his own greatest strength. This is the tragedy of high achievers. The traits that make you successful in one decade become hardwired into your identity, making you rigid exactly when the world requires you to be fluid. This is where we see the difference between a shallow fire and a deep one. A shallow fire needs constant logs of validation to stay lit. A deep fire burns on internal conviction, remaining hot even during 15 years of isolation and silence. Passing this final test requires you to commit the most difficult act of all, ruthlessly acting against your own nature when you realize the world no longer rewards who you used to be. None of these victories are permanent. Fortune never stops turning. The same wealth you managed in your 30s will tempt you in your 50s, and the patience of your youth can easily turn into the stubbornness of your old age. Machiavelli viewed fortune as a violent river flood. It is an unpredictable force of nature that will eventually breach its banks and sweep away everything that is not anchored to the earth. You cannot prevent the rain, but your agency exists in the dry season. You build the dams, the foundations, and the systems long before the water reaches your door. If the cycle is endless and the flood is inevitable, the struggle itself must become the objective. The act of meeting these tests with your own will, knowing you might still lose, is the highest reach of human capability. It is the signature of a life lived with agency, standing in the face of a world that owes you nothing.